が好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ一番好きよ
Terplan, the great Churro counterattack. A beautiful Sunday morning bathed the town of Tomobiki in warm sunlight. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for Ataru Moriboshi's bedroom. Dark circles hung beneath his tired eyes. His hair was a complete mess, his face pale with exhaustion. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, stuck out his tongue, let out a weary sigh, and barely recognized himself. Man, I look awful. No wonder. Right in the middle of the room, taking up almost the entire futon, Ray was fast asleep, completely oblivious to the misery of his unwilling host. He snored peacefully, as if the whole world belonged to him. Desperately clinging to a tiny bit of hope, Ataru shuffled over to the refrigerator and pulled the door open. Empty. Not a single grain of rice, not a slice of bread, not even one lousy cookie. Only the echo of his growling stomach, rumbling so loudly that it actually made him jump. Ataru threw on his casual weekend clothes and with his spirits at rock bottom, slowly stepped outside. He had barely taken a few steps when a tiny floating robot descended right in front of him. With a cheerful metallic beep, it extended an envelope toward him. Curious, Ataru opened it. It was a letter from Ran. "We need to talk about the problem we have in common. I'll be waiting for you at this address." Close quote. In an instant, the sparkle returned to Ataru's eyes. This is my chance! Grinning from ear to ear, he pulled a comb from his pocket and began fixing his hair as he walked. Maybe, just maybe, his streak of bad luck was finally coming to an end. Unfortunately, his stomach had other opinions. It let out another earth-shaking growl, so loud that even the little messenger robot wobbled in midair. Just then, a familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "Well, would you look at that face, my boy?" Cherry suddenly appeared behind him, wearing his usual solemn expression. "The shadow of misfortune is still clinging to you. I can see it as clearly as day." Ataru simply held up Rand's letter with a huge grin. "Not for much longer, you useless old monk." And with that, he bolted down the street at full speed. A second later, bam! Crash! Thud! The camera remained fixed on the now empty street. Only a brief barrage of impacts echoed in the distance. Finally, Cherry slowly staggered back into view. He was covered in bruises, his staff bent crooked, and his head decorated with an impressive collection of lumps. Ow! I think I also saw the shadow of violence. With that, he collapsed flat on his back as a flock of crows silently flew overhead. Following the address written in the letter, Ataru eventually arrived in one of Tomobiki's most exclusive neighborhoods. He stopped for a moment, taking in the lavish surroundings. Whoa, this is definitely where the millionaires live. Beyond an elegant wrought iron gate stood a magnificent mansion. But what truly stole his attention wasn't the mansion itself. It was what rested right beside it, Rand's enormous flying saucer. Its glossy pink hull gleamed in the sunlight, while its large round windows, along the upper section, looked just like strawberries decorating a gigantic cream cake. A sleek metallic platform slowly descended from the ship, extending outward until it formed a graceful walkway all the way to the sidewalk. Ataru confidently stepped onto it and pressed the doorbell. Whoosh! The hatch slid open with a gentle hiss. Standing there was Ran. She wore a beautiful full-length Victorian-inspired dress, adorned with delicate pink lace. Her soft curls cascaded elegantly over her shoulders, held in place by a wide crimson headband. Her smile was so sweet, so angelic. She looked as though she couldn't possibly hurt a fly. "Oh dear, Ataru," she said warmly. "I'm so happy to see you. I've been waiting for you. Please, come in." A little embarrassed, Ataru quickly hid the bouquet of flowers he'd hastily picked from several unsuspecting neighbors' gardens. Then, with a proud grin, he presented it to her. I figured I should bring you a little gift." Ran clasped her hands together, her eyes sparkling with delight. "How wonderfully thoughtful." She accepted the bouquet with graceful care. arranged it inside an elegant vase, and then led him deeper into the house. The main sitting room looked less like the interior of a spaceship and more like an elegant tea parlor from a classic 1940s Hollywood film. Refined antique furniture, delicate lace curtains, beautiful porcelain, a cozy, welcoming atmosphere, a striking contrast to the advanced alien technology waiting just outside. "We have a lot to discuss," Rand said with a gentle smile as she walked down the hallway. Naturally, Ataru couldn't resist being Ataru. With a mischievous grin creeping across his face, he quietly reached a hand toward the back of Rand's skirt, hoping to take advantage of the tiniest moment of distraction. Instantly, almost by instinct, Rand reacted. Without losing that sweet, innocent smile, she caught his wrist. In one lightning-fast motion, she executed a flawless judo throw. Crash! Ataru landed flat on his back. Rand simply looked down at him, still wearing that same angelic smile. My, you're just as enthusiastic as ever, dear Ataru." Still smiling, as if nothing had happened, Rand gracefully gestured toward an elegant table surrounded by finely crafted chairs. "Now then, please, have a seat." Rubbing his sore arm, Ataru quietly obeyed without a single complaint. Once they were both seated, Rand folded her hands together. "Now let's talk about the problem we have in common." Ataru nodded. "I guess you finally figured out a way to solve this whole Ray and Lum situation." Rand gently shook her head. "I've spent hours thinking about it, and there's only one solution." She paused dramatically. "I have to win Ray back." Ataru crossed his arms. "And just how do you plan to pull off a miracle like that?" A mysterious sparkle lit up Rand's eyes. She slowly leaned closer, until her lips were right beside Ataru's ear. Then she began whispering her plan. As she explained each step, Ataru's expression kept changing. First, one eyebrow shot up, soared, then a grin slowly spread across his face. Finally, he nodded over and over again. "I see. Yeah. That just might work." Meanwhile, elsewhere in town, inside her own flying saucer, Lum sat before a makeshift surveillance station. Tiny hidden cameras she had secretly planted aboard Rand's ship displayed the entire meeting perfectly. There was just one problem. The audio was completely unintelligible. All she could see was Rand whispering into Ataru's ear, and Ataru enthusiastically nodding in agreement. "Darn it!" Frustrated, Lum slammed her fist against the control console. The monitor flickered dangerously. "I can't hear a single word." She clenched her fists as tiny sparks crackled from the tips of her horns. "What are those two plotting?" The silent images continued playing, leaving Lum's imagination to wander far beyond any real conspiracy. And naturally, the story she imagined was much worse than reality. Several hours later, the peaceful Sunday afternoon basked beneath the warm glow of the sun. Along the riverbank, dozens of families were enjoying the beautiful weekend. Some couples strolled hand in hand. Others sat together on the grass, chatting quietly. Children laughed as they raced between the trees while a gentle breeze set the leaves dancing overhead. Among all those happy couples, one pair stood out from the rest. Rai and Shinobu were taking a leisurely walk beside the river. Ray looked as though he had stepped straight off the cover of a fashion magazine. Tall, broad-shouldered, athletic. His thick jade green hair swayed gently in the breeze, framing a handsome face with deep blue eyes and features so impossibly perfect that he could have been the star of a romantic TV drama. As he passed, more than one young woman discreetly turned her head for one more admiring glance. Walking beside him was Shinobu, just as beautiful in her own gentle, graceful way. She wore an elegant weekend outfit that perfectly complemented her slender figure. Her fair skin, warm brown eyes, cute little upturned nose, and classic shoulder-length black hair with its neat straight bangs gave her a natural charm that made the two of them look like the perfect couple. Hand in hand, they continued strolling peacefully along the riverside path. Finally, Shinobu looked up at him. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Almost shyly, she asked, "Ray, do you really love me?" Ray gazed back at her with that calm, sincere expression capable of melting anyone's heart. Gently, he took both of her hands into his own. Then, with complete honesty, he answered, "Shinobu, pretty." Her cheeks instantly turned bright red. "Oh, that's such a sweet thing to say," she smiled bashfully. "Ataru never talked to me like that." But at that exact moment, A delicious aroma drifted across the entire park. People all around them turned their heads almost simultaneously. In the distance, a large white food cart slowly rolled into view. It had been cleverly built to resemble a small boat. Clouds of steam puffed from its chimneys as a growing crowd began gathering around it. A large sign proudly announced, "Fresh churros, filled with dulce de leche." Dressed in spotless white uniforms with oversized sailor hats, two vendors worked tirelessly behind the counter. One of them was Ataru Moriboshi. Standing behind the cart, Ataru rang a little handbell with all the enthusiasm he could muster. "Step right up! Step right up!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. "Fresh, piping hot churros, filled with rich dulce de leche, straight out of the fryer. Don't miss your chance." Beside him stood Ran, dressed in the very same crisp white uniform. Wearing her sweetest smile, she gracefully waved a large fan back and forth, sending the irresistible aroma of freshly made churros drifting all across the park. The delicious scent floated straight to Ray's nose. The effect was instantaneous. His eyes flew wide open. He inhaled deeply. Then, without a moment's hesitation, whoosh! He blasted toward the food cart like a rocket. Caught completely off guard, Shinobu was accidentally shoved aside. She lost her balance and landed with a thud beside a nearby bench. Ow! For several long seconds, she remained frozen in disbelief. Slowly, she looked toward the spot where Ray had vanished. Then she glanced down at her own hands. Still stretched out in the air, she blinked twice. "Ray?" But Ray was already standing in front of the cart. Ran stepped forward, carrying an enormous basket overflowing with fresh, steaming churros. With the warmest smile imaginable, she held it out to him. "Ray, these are all for you." His eyes sparkled with pure joy. Without wasting a second, he grabbed the basket and immediately began devouring the churros with an absolutely unbelievable appetite. As Ray ate nonstop, Ran quietly moved closer until she was standing beside him. "Ray," he looked up. The moment he saw her, his face lit up. "Ran? Did you miss me?" she asked softly. Still chewing, Ray nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Ray, Miss Ran." Ran gently caressed his cheek. "Then, will you come back to our planet with me?" Without the slightest hesitation, Ray answered, "Yes. Ray, go back with you." He stuffed another churro into his mouth. Then, while happily chewing, he added with complete sincerity, "Ray, Miss Ran's food." Ran couldn't help laughing. "I knew it." Unable to hold back any longer, she threw her arms around him in a tight embrace. Ray naturally hugged her back, without ever stopping his cheerful feast on the churros she had made especially for him. A few steps away, Ataru folded his arms and smiled with quiet satisfaction. It worked. High above the park, hidden among the thick branches of a tree, another figure had been watching everything unfold. It was Lum. She was dressed in her unmistakable spy outfit, a sleek, one-piece tiger-striped bodysuit with an elegant high collar, a matching oversized cap, and enormous dark sunglasses that concealed nearly all of her face. Crouched silently among the leaves, she followed every movement through a pair of compact binoculars. Then, she saw Ran embracing Ray once again. Slowly, Lum lowered the binoculars. A genuine smile spread across her face. How wonderful. Her gaze shifted toward Ataru. So, after all, he really did help Ran get Ray back. The warmth in her expression deepened. Maybe he isn't as selfish as I thought. For all his flaws, he actually did something good for my friend. For the first time since their bitter argument, Lum's anger began to melt away. Watching Ran smile again, thanks to Ataru's efforts, the very same boy she had dismissed as nothing more than a selfish fraud and a hopeless fool, made her begin to question everything she had believed. Maybe I was too hard on him. And for the first time since the tournament, the resentment she had been carrying inside her heart slowly began to fade. Along with it, the very reason she had chosen to remain on Earth in the first place. A few minutes later, Shinobu slowly wandered along the park's winding paths, heading away from the river. What had begun as a beautiful romantic Sunday afternoon had turned into one of the most humiliating moments of her life. She still couldn't believe it. Ray had let go of her hands, just to sprint after the smell of a few simple churros. The memory replayed vividly in her mind. She remembered being knocked off balance, landing hard beside the park bench. and finding herself sitting flat on the ground while passers-by stared at her in astonishment. She clenched her fists. Tears slowly welled up in her eyes. How embarrassing! Head hanging low, she made her way toward the park's exit. Then, she looked up. A familiar figure stood just a short distance away. Ataru! Without thinking twice, she broke into a run. Ataru immediately opened his arms, wearing the perfect expression of concern he bought, pretending he had absolutely no idea what had happened. Shinobu threw herself into his embrace. Unable to hold it back any longer, she burst into tears. Ataru. He gently wrapped his arms around her, softly patting her back in an effort to calm her down. There. It's okay. I'm here. After a few moments, Shinobu slowly lifted her head. Her beautiful brown eyes were filled with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was so unfair to you. I thought Rei was different. But I was wrong. She buried her face against Ataru's chest once more. Can you ever forgive me? A huge smile spread across Ataru's face. Of course I can. As he continued comforting Shinobu, he discreetly glanced over her shoulder. On the opposite side of the park, beside the little boat-shaped churro cart, Ran was still hugging Rei while he happily continued devouring the enormous basket of churros. When Ran noticed Ataru looking their way, she flashed him a subtle smile, then raised her thumb in a quiet gesture of victory. Their plan had worked exactly as they had intended. Ataru answered with a satisfied grin, then returned his full attention to comforting Shinobu. As the afternoon sun began to set, the atmosphere inside Ran's flying saucer had completely changed. Spread across a large table were stacks of boxes, suitcases, and shopping bags overflowing with every kind of Japanese food imaginable. Candy, cookies, instant ramen, grilled skewers, cakes, churros, practically every delicious treat they had discovered during their afternoon shopping trip. Rei had insisted on bringing a little bit of everything for the journey home. While Ran carefully packed their luggage, Rei, true to himself, never stopped eating. One skewer after another disappeared into his mouth. A few feet away, Ataru and Shinobu stood together, now fully reconciled. Ran closed one of the suitcases and smiled warmly. None of this would have been possible without your help, Ataru. Scratching the back of his head, Ataru smiled modestly. Aw, it wasn't that big a deal. Then something suddenly crossed his mind. Hey, what about Lum? Ran calmly finished arranging another box before answering. Don't worry. I spoke with her a little while ago. A satisfied smile appeared on her face. Seeing Rei and me together again really touched her. I think she's decided not to stay on Earth after all. She's already getting ready to return to our home planet. Ataru let out a long, relieved sigh. Finally, everything's working out. But another question suddenly popped into his head. Wait a second. Ran looked at him curiously. What is it? If you're from the same planet as Lum, then why is your hair pink, while Lum's is jade green? Ran burst into laughter. Oh, Ataru. Still smiling, she brushed aside a few of her pink curls. Hidden beneath them, two small horns appeared, almost identical to Lum's. Don't be so naive, she said with a playful grin. It's called style. She casually let her hair fall back into place. The color's just hair dye. I like changing my look. Ataru's eyes widened. So, you're an Oni too? Ran nodded proudly. Exactly. Lum, Rei, and I all belong to the same race. Ataru smiled. Well, that certainly explains a lot. The three of them laughed together. Finally, Ataru extended his hand. Well, thanks for everything. Ran shook it with a smile, and I sincerely hope we never see each other again. They both burst into laughter. We'd better leave quietly, Ran said as she closed the last suitcase. I'd rather not have all of Rei's admirers show up and cause another scene. Ataru chuckled. Yeah, just like last time. Ran sighed dramatically. I'd rather forget that ever happened. They laughed once more. Off to one side of the room, Rei quietly watched everyone. He hadn't understood a single word of the conversation. After a few seconds, he simply shrugged, took another enormous bite out of the meat skewer Ran had just handed him, and happily went right back to eating. Ran and Rei stepped back into the flying saucer. With a deep mechanical hum, the massive hatch began to close. The boarding ramp slowly folded back into the ship. Only then, Something that had been hidden beneath the ramp throughout the entire farewell was finally revealed. A large metallic crate. Shinobu's eyes flew wide open. They left something behind. She frantically waved both arms. Ray! You forgot a crate! Ataru joined in, shouting as loudly as he could. Hey, come back! But the roar of the ship's engines completely drowned out their voices. The enormous saucer slowly lifted into the sky. Higher, and higher still, until it vanished beyond the glowing evening clouds. Silence settled over the park once again. Curious, Ataru slowly approached the mysterious metal crate. He examined it carefully. Its surface was covered with tiny blinking lights and unfamiliar indicators that pulsed faintly. Huh, what's this box with all the little lights? Without giving it a second thought, he casually gave it a light kick. Clonk. For one long second, nothing happened. Then, beep. A tiny red light began flashing. Beep, beep. Another light came on, then another, and another. Ataru and Shinobu exchanged uneasy glances. Beep, beep. The rhythm grew faster. The lights flashed more rapidly. A low mechanical hum rose from inside the crate, growing louder with every passing second. I don't think it was doing that before, Ataru muttered. Shinobu stared at him in horror. You idiot! She smacked him across the shoulder. Why did you have to kick it? The warning beeps became deafening. The entire crate began shaking violently. Tiny blue bolts of electricity danced across its surface. The air around it started to ripple and distort. Run! Both of them turned and sprinted for their lives, but they were already too late. Without a sound, a gigantic sphere of pure energy blossomed from the strange device. There was no explosion, no fire, only an intense white light, expanding in every direction. As they ran, Ataru and Shinobu watched in disbelief as the trees, the walking paths, the houses, even the sky itself began dissolving as though reality were being erased. Everything around them vanished into the blinding glow. Then, nothing. Silence. Suddenly, BOOM! The ground shook beneath a cloud of dust and debris. Slowly, Ataru opened his eyes. A few yards away, Shinobu struggled to her feet amid the wreckage. They looked at each other. Then, almost in unison, they slowly raised their eyes to the world around them. They were no longer in Tomobiki. At least, not the Tomobiki they knew. The city lay in ruins. Buildings had been reduced to smoking piles of rubble. Columns of black smoke rose into a blood-red sky. Far off in the distance, enormous warships, shaped like colossal metallic cigars, loomed across the horizon like dark storm clouds. Explosions, air raid sirens, gunfire. The distant echoes of war surrounded the devastated landscape. Ataru swallowed hard. Where are we? Having barely escaped the mysterious explosion, Ataru and Shinobu began making their way through the shattered remains of what had once been the town of Tomobiki, surrounded by smoke, distant explosions, and the relentless sounds of battle. They pressed onward, with no idea where or even when they had arrived. And, more importantly, no clue how they would ever find their way back home.